It takes a bit of time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Now we go to Ghana,
where we're looking at another entry point, MUS entry point in the domestic plus approaches in Ghana. And what I'm presenting is mainly the work done by Steph for the Rockefeller Foundation on the scoping of MUS in Ghana. So in Ghana there's basically 4 formal service delivery models for domestic water supply. In rural areas there's community operated and maintained point sources, so mainly boreholes with hand pumps, which are designed, which are implemented to deliver services at the basic level. So that means in Ghana, that means 20 liters per capita per day of good quality water within an acceptable distance, which is 500 meters, and with not too many people per borehole. So that means 300 people per borehole. That's a basic level of service. The real service levels are however a lot lower, as we've been talking about, and as has been showed by the research done under WashCoast, but also under MUS. Real service levels are a lot lower, basically because of crowding of boreholes, point sources, and because of the distance that people need to travel to access water from these points. Nevertheless, still people use them quite a bit for multiple uses, going beyond just using them for domestic uses. In small towns, the main service delivery model are pipe systems, community managed pipe systems, which generally provide a bit of a higher service level, so a bit beyond the 20 liters per capita per day. They provide more water, usually of a better quality, better reliability, better accessibility, because to some degree they're being provided through household connections. And then you see we've been observing quite a bit of multiple uses, especially around informal commercial activities within this kind of service delivery model. And then there's an emerging service delivery model, which is kind of in between the small towns and the rural areas, which are the limited mechanical schemes that Steph already mentioned, which are basically boreholes with 1 or 2 standpipes connected to it, which improves the service level because you get water closer to people, because you do it through standpipes, so through a small limited pipe system. And so there's more potential for MUS as well. But there's at the moment it's quite an emerging model, so there's very little data yet on the actual use of these kind of systems. And then there's also the urban areas where the main service delivery model is utility management. And there we can see MUS in the form of formal industries using water from utility managed, from the utility, but also informal commercial activities. Using water for like beer brewing or for small industrial uses. So using the water from the utility.
Like beer brewing.
Like beer, or how do you call it? Yeah, it's called pito brewing, but it's kind of a beer. Or kenke making, like local foods, local drinks, etc. So, because Steph already showed the WashCoast data, I thought maybe I'll show a little bit different data. This is from the MUS baseline, showing the percentage of systems which have some degree of multiple uses. In green you see the use of percentage of systems that are being used for gardening, in blue for watering livestock, and in red for small commercial uses, which in rural areas also include things like brick making, which is actually quite important. So you see quite a high percentage of systems are being used for uses beyond domestic uses. This doesn't mean that everyone in the community is using these systems. Maybe there's only 1 or 2 people making bricks, but it does mean that a large percentage of systems are being used for at least more uses than just domestic uses. This is based on some data from another study that we've been doing for Rotary and USAID, This indicates the percentage of the population within different communities that actually uses water for multiple uses, uses water for other uses than domestic use. So you can see quite a bit of a variation in the number of, or the percentage of people using water for multiple uses. In 4 communities, none at all. In 1 community, 50%, and everything in between. So in general, still quite, there's quite a lot of de facto, as we call it, de facto multiple uses. So use of point sources which are not really intended and which go beyond domestic use. So under the Rockefeller study, there were some potential models for MUS identified under the different entry points. So for irrigation plus, for community-driven MUS, and for the domestic plus approach. So I'll focus on the domestic plus approach here. And basically 3 main models were identified to enhance MUS within, from a domestic plus angle. First one is communal productive uses of point sources, so related to that service delivery model with of the point source, of the hand pump. Then productive uses of pipe systems in small towns and cities, so related to that service delivery models of the small towns, the small pipe systems in small towns and in urban areas. And then thirdly, upgrading point sources to limited mechanical systems with a higher level of service, so related to that service delivery model of the mechanized systems, the mechanical systems. So having a close look at each of these 3 models, potential models for MUS. So first of all, the domestic plus approach around point sources. So that can be done through promotion of cattle troughs and communal gardens around these hand pumps. And that probably still needs a little bit of showcasing, a little bit of piloting. It's being done in Ghana to some extent, but not really at scale yet. So there's still a little bit of a need for lesson learning and for piloting on that. So there's a big potential of this model. There's about 10 million people relying on point sources, which could be, which could benefit from us and which could, from us around these point sources. If we zoom into the northern belt and the coastal belt, which are the areas, as Steph already explained, which are the areas which really, where people really depend on these point sources because of a lack of alternative sources. So then the target area would become a bit less than 10 million, but still quite a high potential of this kind of model. Then related to policy and legislation, it's the Community Water and Sanitation Agency, CWSA, who regulates it. It doesn't provide that many limitations towards MUS, and actually it even stimulates it a bit because it's trying to move towards higher level of services, which it is encouraging. Related to water resources, limited limitations there as well. It depends a bit on the yield of the boreholes, whether or not boreholes can be used for MUS. That's the only limitation related to water resources. Then related to the institutional arrangements, MUS can be done within the existing institutional arrangements of CWSA as the agency, the metro, municipality and district assemblies as the service providers delegated to community-based service providers, which in the case of point sources are the WATSAMs, the Water and Sanitation Committees. So basically, in order to promote MUS, the staff involved should be made more aware of MUS. It should be included in the already existing, MUS should be included in already existing project cycle. And as we've been saying, promoting MUS within this kind of model would also require setting of local regulations. Then from a financial point of view, this could be done with minimal incremental costs. There's already a lot of point sources in place. Kind of upgrading them from us doesn't take a lot of incremental costs. It's main because it doesn't require extra hardware costs. It's basically piggybacking on investment of rural voice services that are ongoing anyway. Technically, it can be kind of upgrading point sources to be used for MUS is a first step. It's a first step, but really going it can be a first step, but really going towards MUS multiple use water services will require a move towards different technologies, because point sources are kind of limited in their potential for MUS. So commercial use of pipe systems in small towns, for that MUS can be enhanced by using the existing models with the different levels of services that are already there, but there might be a need for a little bit of adjustments. It basically uses market mechanisms. Users pay for the amount of water that they're using, so if they're willing to pay for the water, they can use it for multiple uses. So basically, in order to increase multiple use related to this model, it's all about extension support. It's making people aware that this kind of water can be used for different uses. So the potential is related to the number of people in small towns. Policy and legislation is defined by the bylaws and the CWSA guidelines. The implications on water resources are probably quite small. Only in the bigger cities there might be limitations of water resources. Institutional arrangements are already there. There is the CWSA, there are the water boards managing pipe systems, so there's not a lot of implications on the institutional arrangements. And related to financing and cost recovery, a lot of the incremental costs would have to come from the payment of tariffs. A lot of the incremental costs will be related to making more water available through these pipe systems. And that will be recovered through tariffs, people paying more for more water. So technical issues are rather straightforward, not a lot of limitations there. And then upgrading point sources to limited mechanized systems. So as already explained, it's basically going from already existing boreholes, upgrading them by putting a mechanized system on top of it, so putting a pump on it and adding a little pipe system to it with a couple of stem pipes. So increasing the amount of water available, but also bringing it closer to where people can use it for multiple uses. So potential for that depends on the number of boreholes and the number of people in the regions, the number of boreholes that have the potential of being upgraded. So that's only possible for the somewhat more high-yielding boreholes. Financially, this kind of upgrading means incremental costs of about $5 to $6 per capita, so about a 20% increment on top of the normal investment of about $30 per capita for normal boreholes. So technical issues are also limited. There's already standardized designs for these kind of systems, but there might be a need to look a bit more into designs of community gardens and cattle troughs to add to these kind of systems in order to allow them to be used for multiple uses. So then, yeah, no problem. So investment opportunities, there's low risks. There's the potential to reach a large number of people, but impact is limited. Of course, these kind of systems only have a limited amount of water that can be used for multiple uses. Consortia for investment opportunities include CWSA, the district assemblies and their donors. and opportunities for learning and sharing are the already existing platforms that are there, including the Resource Center Network, the Coalition of Water and Sanitation NGOs, and the National Level Learning Alliance that's already in place. And actually, we'll be presenting the findings from this study in 2 weeks' time at the National Level Learning Alliance platform. So then the conclusion, in Ghana, MUS is practiced within the formal domestic services, but not yet clearly articulated in documents and in sector thinking. So it's there already kind of de facto, but it's not really part of the formal system yet. But there's quite an openness to considering it. There's an openness to think about how to provide higher levels of services and how that can then be used for multiple uses. And there's no prohibition towards the idea of multiple uses. There's a move from de facto practices of multiple uses, which are there already, towards thinking about how can we go to more planned multiple use water services, how can we think about MUS more in the implementation models. A risk that's still there is a risk of sustainability, which goes beyond MUS. There are still a lot of issues related to sustainability, especially to community-based service providers, the limitations of the community-based service providers, and the support that's being provided or that's not being provided by service authorities. So that goes a bit beyond MUS, but it's a general concern, but obviously that is also a concern for provision of multiple use water services in Ghana and the potential for scaling that up. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Marieke, for this comprehensive overview of really looking into what each of these models are in quite a bit of detail.